What we want to do here is be each other's educator. So I see this more as a workshop than a lecture. The more you can contribute, the better it is. The more you can give us your thoughts, your recommendations, the more we can grow from this. And this is just the first event, and we're going to continue each month. But in between meetings, what we want to do is we're starting a Facebook group. We're talking a little about doing a LinkedIn group, or we're going to do a Google Plus community. But most people are on Facebook, and so that's where we're going to be at. So Chris and I will invite all of you to this group. It's a secret group on Facebook. So you're going to have an invitation, and there we can share more material. I can share the whole presentation on there. And we can just give each other more resources, ask each other questions, because what we're wanting to create is just a community of people who can help each other out. And we're hopefully, since it's a secret group, everybody feels comfortable asking questions and asking for feedback. That's awesome. Let's get started with what I have prepared for today. When you're starting a small business, what I especially talk about is this whole idea, like, you're one person and you do what you're passionate about and you want to make this a business. What you often hear from your friends and from family members who all want to support you is just do it. Just take the plunge and you're gonna do great because you do what you love. And if you just do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life. And probably all of us now know that nothing could be further from the truth. You do what you love and you try to make it a business, and suddenly you find out you have lots of work, and the part of doing what you love gets smaller and smaller. And then you try to grow it. And so the reality when you're growing a business is more like you're trying to move something like this. It's this huge, big, heavy thing, and you need lots of energy to get it started. And getting it off the ground is the hardest part. Once you have that, you might be able to get a lot done and to transport a lot to where you want to go. But while you're getting started and you're in the very beginning, it looks more like this. You're pushing and pushing, and that business partner of yours is just standing there having a great time, standing in the way. So that's usually how it feels in the very beginning, when you're like, now I want to do what I'm passionate about, and you don't get anywhere, and it just feels like you're totally stuck. So what I want to do with this presentation is just get us going a little more, get us out of the dumps of standing on the ground. Now I read what Chris said about me in announcing this event, and it makes me blush. It sounds amazing. It's not like there's lies in there, but it is looking at all the good parts. For me, if I look back and I look at the last 5 years, what I see is a lot of things that I should have done differently. I see so many things where I was just blowing money out of the window, where I was just spending so much time doing things that aren't really necessary, working on projects that turn out to go nowhere, and trying to work with people. The first person I hired was my then girlfriend, and now is my wife, and of course we had to learn to work together.
Is that part of the mistakes?
Part of the mistakes was pretty much not hiring her, but how we got started working together. It was ridiculous. I mean, we were literally bickering at each other and going back and forth because we dragged the relationship into the business, and so it was. Sorry. Do you want to say something about it? Go on.
No, sorry. No, it's just that was it. There were no boundaries. It was all one big blurry mess.
So I guess the most important part that we learned from that was that we had to really separate the business and the private. We had to figure out how are we going to do this constructively, and where we're now is great. I mean, where we're now, we keep supporting each other. We're able to work more in a way, but in more pleasantly. We can have work meetings at home, but we schedule it as a meeting. But it took a while to figure it out. Fortunately, it didn't ruin anything, and the relationship got better instead of worse, but I know that that's not the case for everybody. So I tried to make a list of like the 5 worst mistakes, the things that I should have avoided. And there is this idea out there, you've heard it, build it, they will come. So you're setting up your dream. And that's what I did. I was building a therapeutic business. I was in Germany licensed as a naturopathic physician. I used to work by myself, just a room that I rented, and I did all administration myself, and was seeing clients, scheduling it myself, answering phone calls, and so on. Then I came to the US, and what I had to do here in order to get a visa was to really build something bigger where I can hire Americans. That's pretty much the idea behind the visa, is you give work to Americans instead of taking work away by coming here and working. So I was forced to build something bigger than I would naturally have done, and now I'm very happy about it because it gives me a lot of freedom. But in the beginning, I thought, I know what I'm doing, I give great treatments, people love it, they feel like they're getting better, and I have this excellent business partner and he knows the industry. He was a great friend, and we thought we know so much, we're both good therapists and we can just put this together, and we wanted to build a place where other therapists like us would find their dream job. So in a way, we built our dream job. But neither one of us really knew how to run a business. He used to work for the Ritz-Carlton. He was like the lead therapist at their spa. So we both thought he knows the industry and he knows how it works in the US. And I'm the one who has all the European expertise and the treatments. And yeah, no education about running a business was noticeable a problem. And what I think now is like, what were we thinking? I mean, really, what is it? And I see it everywhere. Everybody does the same thing. They think I'm great at this, so I'm going to build a business out of it. I mean, would you do the same thing if you were building a house? Would you just say, I'm just going to buy a plot of land and I'm going to buy some cinder blocks and I'm just going to start putting them on top? Nobody would do that. You would at least get a book, right? I didn't get a book on how to build it. I didn't. And then I started hiring people, and I mean, I started out obviously with the person who was the closest to me after that really great friend who left after 6 months because the economy crashed, and so there was outwards factors that we couldn't have controlled, and he was just not making enough money, and so I kept putting my private money into the place. I started hiring contractors as therapists, and we started having like a few people for the office and answering the phone and so on. And I wanted to be just everybody's best buddy. I felt like we're doing this together so we can just make decisions based on consensus. We just sit down and discuss it, and I mean, you know what happens there, right? You're sitting there talking and talking and talking, and nobody does it. Especially when you have a business partner and you're thinking we're doing it all 50-50. So there was a lot of standing in each other's way, and it was kind of lucky that he had so much pressure just by trying to make a living that eventually he just took an opportunity and moved away. But before that, we had all these arguments about how we're going to do the pricing. We had already started. I felt like lowering the prices was a really bad message. It would pretty much signal our regular clients that they have been paying so much, and now we're just suddenly saying this is really worth a lot less. So I said, we can't do that. I said, if you want to run a different business, please go run a different business, not this one. And that's what happened there. But it went on the same way, and that's why I look back and I think, oh, I did so many things wrong, because we started hiring therapists and I tried to be friends with them. I treated them as total equals. I didn't say, these are the rules, these are the policies, and that's another thing that I found out. I have to be a leader. I can't be a friend. I can't hold everybody's hand all the time. I see Cynthia nodding the whole time. Did you have a similar experience?
Almost too similar, for
Yeah.
all of it.
Do you want to share a little bit?
You know, I think that when you have a small business and you have people that work with you, it's, you know, you're in there grind, you know, do at the grind together
Right.
all day long, and you know, somebody's bad day turns to, you know, reflects on you, and you know, it's a small business, because I came from a corporate background, and very different, and then suddenly, you know, going from a corporate background to a very small business that you own was shocking, because I had not expected that. Any of the, from the business partner and having the discussions, everything that you've said so far, I'm just like, oh my God, it's so nice to know I'm not the only person that's experiencing this. So, that's why I'm nodding aggressively, because I get all of these points, every one of them.
Yeah, that makes me happy too, because I feel like I'm not the only one who was so stupid and blind. And I think it happens a lot. Yeah, bending over backwards for partners. That got really bad when we tried to bring an acupuncturist into the business. And she does amazing work, but I wanted her to be there so much, and I thought this was perfect. We have all the massage therapy, and then we add acupuncture, and it's gonna be great. And I just tried to do everything her way, because I wanted her to be comfortable. And I mean, eventually we had two completely separate visions, and we tried to bridge the gap, and yeah, that was a year that I really wasted, pretty much. And there were other things, of course, external factors that happened that also made it harder, but you know, you have these internal things that you could just have avoided with better information. What I think now would have given me the best information would have been just get more help, just talk to people, just sit down with people who are always happy to give advice, and there's so many who are. Whenever I talk to other business owners now, especially the older ones, especially the ones who have really been through all this, who started out by themselves and then started hiring people 20 years ago, they're all happy to talk. They, you know, you sit down for lunch and they tell you everything you want to know. It's amazing. So in the last 2 years, I've been listening a lot more to good advice. I've been asking a lot more, and I've found out who are the right people for me to talk to. Because of course, I don't need the ones who always only say, you're brilliant, you're gonna do great, you're amazing, keep doing what you're doing, it's wonderful. That's nice, but it doesn't help. Do you get that, Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have people around you who are not helpful by giving compliments?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, what you were saying, so much of that was with us too in the beginning, and we just knew absolutely nothing about what we were getting into, but we knew we wanted a business, and then jumped right in thinking the same thing with you. And then, but yeah, the lack of, we kind of didn't get going until really about 3 or 4 years ago, and now even more so, hitting it more full time now. But the time that we wasted fumbling around, whether it be out of pride or out of ignorance, instead of just going to people that you knew, like exactly like you're saying, that have been in business, 10 and 20 years, we could have been much further ahead,
Yeah.
than we are now, which we're doing fine now, but there's still things that the learning, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
And now it gets easy, right? You do it
Right.
a few times. It's like training a puppy. Positive reinforcement. At first you're nervous about it, and eventually it comes natural. And every time you feel like, oh, this is so much better now. I found really a lot of help with Red Group. We joined the MBA, and it was just a few months later that I saw an announcement on Facebook about Red Group, and then, yeah, you and I pretty much became the founding members together with a few others. And that's where I first started to see there are others out there, and this is not just for marketing, this is to just help me understand what I'm doing here. And I started to see myself as a business owner and an employer and a boss, much more than just a therapist who helps people feel better. Because that's all I wanted. That was my whole motivation always. Make everybody feel better, make everybody happy all the time. Everybody who works for me the same way as the clients who come in. Now what we have to do is learn a lot. For me, learning goes by reading books. That's, in addition to talking to people, I just bought a bunch of business books. I'll be sharing a few of those with you. If you don't learn by reading books, if you like to watch videos, if you like to follow lectures, you will find these same people in TED Talks or in interviews. There's so much information out there right now. You find everybody on YouTube pretty much. And of course, we're going to post things in the Facebook group. Does anybody know this book, Never Eat Alone? Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. What did you like
It's
about it?
excellent. You get excited after you read that book in terms of making, extending your circle of influence
Yeah.
and your networking and how you never stop networking. And I think most of us here are women at this table, and that's an area that we tend to like fall back on. But he's like, never eat alone. So like at lunchtime, you're all, you have to eat, and other people need to eat. So you should try to capitalize on that and never just like sit at your desk and have a sandwich or whatever.
Mhm.
Really use that as an opportunity to, you know, just cultivate existing relationships, or you need to go outside of your inner circle and invite such and such to come over so that that continues to expand and follow through. And then he gives you great advice for how to follow up. And so this guy has a network. He takes that 6 degrees of separation to like 60 degrees. And that guy is like out there.
Yeah. At first, when I started thinking more about networking, I thought, oh, this is so calculating. Am I supposed to just talk to people because I want them to do stuff for me? And I found out very quickly that it was completely the other way around. I mean, I just started talking to people who I like, who I want to talk to more, who I want to learn more about. And then because I like them, I want to help them out. So I get them a referral to somebody I know who could be a benefit from that connection. And just by getting to know people personally, you feel much better about trusting them. And that was also built a lot through the participation over years in Red Group. Just the kind of relationships we created over the long time of getting together again and again, not eating alone, but having another lunch with another Red Group member, or having meetings with people who we just met somewhere completely different. I started randomly just saying, like, do you want to have lunch, talk shop? And a lot of other people I was talking to were surprised at first, but it's always been productive. And I started giving advice to other business owners who are kind of in the same line of work. Other massage therapists specifically who are running their own businesses started asking me, but also people like my dentist, or, you know, eventually it's like, how do you do that with your employees? I'm like, well, we can have lunch, we talk all about it. And then over time you create these relationships that get you closer to other people. And yeah, it's like you say, but it's hard for people like me because I'm really introverted, and I don't have a problem standing here talking to you because that's easy. I have a job. I'm standing here, I'm doing this presentation, I know what to do. That's why I started volunteering when we were doing Red Group, because then I was the treasurer, so I knew what I had to do. I have a job here. And so that made it a lot easier. What I hate is going to a mixer and you just have to introduce yourself to people, and that just creates panic for me. So this whole networking idea was, for me, very negatively biased, and I just needed to see that as an introvert, I like these one-on-one connections, and I started to understand this is what I want to build, and this is what I can build on more, and that's just what I need to focus on. So if I go to a mixer, I just try to have a good conversation with one person. I don't need to give my business card to 20 people. I just need to make one good connection, and then my wife is the one who talks to 20 people. Anything else about networking somebody wants to share? A good experience or a good tip, something that you noticed helps?
You know, I started, the coolest thing when I started my business was there was a networking group. It was called Women Business Owners Network. It was in the early 80s. And it was under the umbrella of Valencia Community College Lifetime Learning. We got funded from the state, like for seniors or something. But I am still friends with 10 friends. We all were starting our business about the same time. It was Brown Bag Lunch. And it was teaching us. The woman that was taught us, you know, she would ask for topics, you know, and back then it was like working with men, okay, you know, even though it sounds so weird, but, you know, and then, you know, working out of your home, and how do you deal with having people come into your home when you have a bedroom as an office.
Right.
And it was the best, because it wasn't about helping, I mean, it was helping each other. It wasn't about business cards out in their faces and all that, at all.
Oh, good.
And it really was like exactly what you're telling me. You know, we learned, you know, how to mentor each other. We brought professional CPAs in, we brought different people in to speak, and we were all just learning at the same time. So it was kind of like kindergarten networking, but that's where I learned to network. And when I came out years later, I didn't do it for a long time, I didn't have to. But when I came out and everybody like started throwing their business cards in your face, or you sat down at lunch and there were 50 million brochures and you had no clue, I was like, what is this? You know, because that's not how I was taught.
Yes. There are no real estate people here right now. That was the first thing when I tried to go to these mixers, and there's like a bunch of realtors just cornering you, and they all come up and they all look perfect. They always have this perfect hair and these perfect little outfits. Like, hey, I'm so glad to meet you. And I'm like, whoa. I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, those things are always what Deborah handles really well, so I'm that's very extrovert. And I like to deal with the ones where it's more about learning. And that's what I got out of Red Group and in general participation with the MBA, and that's why I'm so happy about what we're doing here. You were gonna say something, Anna?
Yeah, like yourself, I am an introvert as well, and it's the mindset about what networking is all about. And I know my strength. My strength is I do better in a pond. I don't do well in an ocean. So I'm much better in small groups, one-on-one, right? So no problem. See, chatty, kidding. So, but what has happened through the last, 20 years or so is just by nature. I have friends that have lost their jobs, and these are people that are highly successful people.
Yeah.
I mean, have MBAs, have masters, have all kinds of, credentials, and they have their brag book.
Right.
Look at my success. I have letters of recommendations and everything. And these are the people that on Friday got a high five from everybody in the corporate world because they closed, because of hitting numbers, because of whatever, and on Monday are escorted to their cars. And so what's amazing to me is that when you've been so successful and before, it wasn't always, you kept hearing it's who you know and not what you know and whatever, but it's more so now. Because sitting behind a computer trying to find a job is not going to happen. And it's like after the recession, my whole thing is that I think there was a huge shift, and the most popular sentiment was who moved my cheese. And so then you have to deal with all those emotions of like what you're hanging on to and how things ought to be and my vision, blah, 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 blah. But in essence, life is here and it's saying, hey, we moved your cheese, so now what are you gonna do?
Right.
And so when you get over the pouting and you get over that emotional stuff, are you gonna just get up and do something different? And what I liked about Never Eat Alone is that it's much easier to reach out to people and get acquainted and just learn more from other people when you're coming from a space of okayness. And it's not desperate.
Yes.
And it's not like, oh my God, I need money, can you sign this contract? Whatever, like I'm like I'm about to get, whatever. So you don't come from desperation, you come from ease. And so you're more open. And so since you don't need anything from that person, you can be more present for that person and hopefully give more. And then it's true, we tend to want to be around people we like, but how are we gonna know how we like each other if we don't hang out with each other? And so my whole mindset on that whole networking, and I tend to attract other people that are like, Anna, it's easy for you, that networking. It is not easy. It's terrifying. And even though I, know some of you guys, it's still terrifying just to come up and say, hi, how's it going?
Yeah.
That piece of it is still difficult, and then remembering. So it's never easy, but it's kind of like, I think we need to try to remember that it's totally different now. And it's much better for us to constantly work on that. If anything, I keep telling people to do that. Gotta network.
Yeah.
And not see it from that vantage point that it
What
seems
helps
like
me-
manipulative.
It
It's not
helps me
about that.
really a lot is to do some of the networking online. Because being able to hide behind the computer is nice. I can network in my pajama pants. And I mean, the way we can use social media productively is just as a networking tool. A lot of the business education I have specifically about marketing I got from Twitter. I don't think I got clients from Twitter, but I got a lot of great information just by some of the bloggers I followed, but usually by people who do the same thing. They talk to us. We're all going back and forth and we're building these little friendships just because you share somebody else's content, so they start being aware of you. So it's the same thing all over, again, just online, that you're doing something for somebody else because you like what they put out, and then they're gonna do something for you, and so it goes back and forth, and eventually you start talking. So there are a bunch of people all over the US, even in other countries, who I would love to meet because we made friends on Twitter. Another thing I want to recommend is this book, Decisive. I love that because mostly by what you already said, Cynthia, is like, I'm not the only one. With that book, you get a lot of people who have had huge corporations, big CEOs, and horrible decisions they made. And they have a lot of these case studies, but they also have a lot of science what goes into making a decision. And they do it really in an entertaining way. It was really easy to read. It was like one of those books, one of the very few nonfiction books that I had trouble putting down. And it really explains how you can make a good decision. The most important takeaway that I got from that book is that we have to listen to people who tell us what we don't want to hear. Because the biggest problem that stands in the way of good decisions is confirmation bias. Do you all know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of this whole idea that we only listen to what we want to hear, and it goes so far that we don't remember the parts, even if we have it right in front of us. We only remember the article that goes behind the opinion that we already have, and we forget the rest. And it's not like we do it deliberately, we just really don't remember it at all. We were talking when I was preparing this talk about fear of decision making, which is not one of my problems at all. I'm the opposite. I'm so much for just doing something. Deb was making fun of me because we just walk somewhere and I'll just determine it, walk down the street. I look like I know exactly where I'm going, and that's something I do in my whole life. I always look like I know exactly what I'm doing here. Even if I have no clue, she's like, where are you going? This is not where we have to turn over. Like, oh, okay. And then I just go that way. But yeah, I wanted you to just tell us a little about this whole idea of fear.
Yeah, because we were talking about that and how that's been my biggest problem is I'm so afraid of making the wrong choice that I
Make no choice.
I make no choice, or I get to the point where I have to make a choice in a hurry, and then I just make a choice, which I could have done before without all the pressure. And so one of the things I said to her was like, when I've done theater most of my life, and one of the things that they always talk about in theater is when you're on stage, you have to make choices. And there are no wrong choices. There are good choices and there are bad choices, but there are no wrong choices. The only wrong choice is not making one, because then you're just standing there in the plays going on around you and you're not doing anything. And so on stage, I learned how to mostly make choices and perform and do stuff in theater. But in my life, it was always very hard, and it's still hard. But at a very low point when I wasn't making choices and I really needed to, I sought professional help, and then later the help of mentors and friends and my wife and people who have different experience than I do, and I'm a lot better at making choices. I'm much better at making choices for the business now, and I'm getting better at making choices for myself. And actually making them, and so what if it's a bad choice? I deal with it, I move on, and I learn something from it, and I make a better choice next time.
How does it feel to be afraid?
It's like, it's more, you don't even realize you're afraid because you're questioning so much. The fear makes you so uncertain that you're not feeling, oh my God, I can't, make a choice. What you're feeling, what you're doing is overthinking it. And you're like, well, if I do this and this happens, then I have to deal with this. And then what am I going to do if I have to deal with that? And you just keep going into that cycle, and you end up being paralyzed by it.
Yeah, I think I might be so scared of paralysis that I always keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's a great book. I know it sounds weird to read a book about decisions, but that was really, if you like to read, that's a great one. That's another great book, and I would say this is a must-read, because we have negotiations all over the place, in every part of our life. This had been a bestseller through the 80s, and it's still selling well, and it's still being quoted, and it's still part of university education in a lot of different fields. So if you haven't read it yet, I would highly recommend to read it. If you don't like to read, get the audiobook or...
Does a TED Talk too.
Oh, very good. See, I didn't know that.
He's written like 5 different books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that one was a recommendation of one of my mentors, and that was eye-opening, because I got suddenly this idea that the win-win is fine. And as I said before, I always want to be good friends with everybody. I want to make everybody happy. And so you have this idea that a negotiation is always like there's one winner and there's one loser. And what he makes perfectly clear is that you try to find the win-win, and the best way to find that is, instead of thinking about everybody wants something that's fair, to just let go of this idea of fairness and just first find out, what do you want out of this? What's your motivation? What is your drive? And because some people want money, some people want some recognition, that people might want completely different things. And once you find out what the partner wants, then you can find a better agreement that helps everybody. And this book really helped me to just start thinking outside the box, start finding ways of figuring out what I want, because often I don't really know what I want either. Finding out what the other person wants, and most of all, to have a negotiation process. Instead of just sitting there going against one another saying, I want 70%, no, that's crazy, you can only have 50. Just to get a process where at first you lay down just general ideas, and then you meet another time, and so that really helped me to just have not so much fear of negotiations anymore, and also to really understand that we can make everybody happy. And in the cases where we can't, we shouldn't negotiate at all. As soon as we find out that we can't both be happy, we should just call it a day and say, okay, this doesn't work, and we just find somebody where we can be happy, because otherwise you end up making yourself miserable and others around you. So this whole idea of the win-win is good, the win-win works, and everybody can be happier at the end of it, made a big change for me in how I see my life, my business, and everything around me. So that's, if you haven't read it yet, or just watch the TED Talk.
Yeah,
I think
just
we have
made a
to
note about
look
that.
at
Lou, is that mostly in dealing with business relationships or personal relationships, or both?
It's both.
Okay.
It's, he deliberately talks about families, about negotiations with children, for example, or anything, because a lot of things are in negotiation. We figure, you know, where do you want to go on vacation? All these kind of things. So it just helps to make the process clearer, and it also helped me to see what is a negotiation. I mean, I might think we're just talking, but in reality, we're trying to negotiate who's getting what and what we want out of a situation.
I'd be curious to hear your feedback, your experience with that, since you're in mediation.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It's
Perfect.
based on,
All that.
exactly.
We know how to do that, we don't have to do everything else. We got that part down, but it's all the other stuff.
So that's exactly what it's
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
The mediators recommend the book.
They
Okay, very good. Yeah, recommended by the
We
experts.
did a presentation at a high school. The teacher I knew asked us to come in and talk to her seniors,
Yeah.
classic girls, about conflict resolution and what it means to their life. And we've gone back 2 years now, we've been keep getting invited back, and it's really exciting to be able to teach some of these skills to younger people,
Yeah.
so that they can take it and talk to their mother with it. Or
Yeah.
it's just fun to watch people's eyes open up about the opportunities that now they can, you can understand, they can hear better, they can communicate better, they can listen better.
And it's great that you're doing that, because I mean, so many people just will never read a book. I love books, obviously, but I know when I'm talking to other people, it's a lot of people just don't ever read for lots of reasons, often because they didn't grow up around books. So if you make that
Interaction's always
easier.
fun, then we do role plays.
Yeah.
We actually give them a puzzle, and they have to try to get get to one end.
Right.
Nobody goes around the outside and comes the other way.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they have to go through the whole maze the hard way,
I
so-
want to take that class. It's not
Yeah.
fun. You should do it for the MBA. Could you do that?
Yeah.
Could we do that? Could we make it an
Sure.
MBA event or
That
one
would
of
be
the
fun.
series? Could we do that?
We're already
We should
doing it.
totally do that. That's
It's
awesome.
on the list, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yay.
Sweet. Okay,
I'll come to that one.
I was talking about business mythology, and then we have another bestseller, of course, the E-Myth. A lot of you have read that, I'm sure. And if you haven't, you should, because everybody should. I heard about that one, and that's again networking in a way, and just going into different situations, because I was invited to be on the advisory board for a massage school. And there was another guy on that advisory board who honestly I didn't care much about, because he was one of those people who run a lot of different rehabilitation clinics, and we kind of see it from the other side, where people feel like they're being pushed through on an assembly line, and it all is about the bottom line, so much more than getting rid of the back pain. But I forced myself to stay open and listen, and so we had a really good conversation, and I was just asking about the most important lesson, and he said, just read that book. And yeah, the myth, if you don't know the book and if you don't know the idea, the myth is what I talked about initially. It's this whole thing of you have something that you're really good at, and so you should be doing it for yourself instead of having this 9-to-5 job where you're doing what you're really good at for somebody else. You should be making it your own business because you can do it so much better. And that's pretty much the myth. And then we find out that actually what had happened in that 9-to-5 job was that we had outsourced all the things we don't know how to do, and somebody else was doing them. And yeah, that's it. So this one is just laying down the groundwork of how do you organize a business, how should you organize a business, and that was very helpful for me, much better than all the business plans that people told me I should write that I never found were really helpful.
Yeah, we in our office, we always recommend that to anyone that's thinking about starting their own business.
Just get ready for taxes, that'll shape you up real quick.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I don't look at all.
That'll shape you up real quick.
People tell me about taxes, I'm like, that was my CFO, so she meets with the accountant, and I'm like that. Fortunately, I can't do that because she's my wife. Otherwise, I would have to have a look at it now and then. I say this is not really necessary, but this was good for marketing purposes. So if you feel like you need a crash course in marketing yourself, especially if you have a profession where you're dealing with clients, you want to book more clients, you want to figure out how to learn this new idea of pull marketing versus push marketing, this is a good one. This whole concept is what you usually try to do with a good website. You kind of make sure that if people type in a search term, they find you. So they find your website, they read something interesting about what you do, and they're already thinking, whoa, this is the right person. So they come to you, they call you, and they already feel like, I want to work with you because what I found out there sounds so great. And you can do the same thing with social media, of course, you can do the same thing with networking. It's always about just putting information out there that makes you look as the expert in your field, and that gets people to trust you before they're even working with you. So most of the sales work is already done because you're talking to somebody who feels like, yeah, I want to work with you already. When can we start? I had a new client in 2 days ago. She was just asking for good massage therapists on Facebook, and somebody said, yeah, I have to go to these people. And so she came in and she already had this whole attitude of, this is the good place. This is a place, this is so much better than all the other places because my friend on Facebook said so. And so that was easy, you know, then you make her feel a little better. And she's like, where's the membership contract? And I say, well, you can do trials with the other therapists, and you can do this cheap trial. She said, no, I want the contract. No, I want the contract. And this is what you get with good personal marketing. So there is so much information about this topic. That's what I got out of Twitter in the beginning, was just to find all these different marketing blogs and to understand this whole new idea that you can just put out information and that makes people come to you. You don't have to cold call, you don't have to push yourself onto people, which is what most of us hate anyway. How do you feel about that? What's your experience with luring people in just by being the good one?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, because I hate cold calling. I don't have time for one thing, but yeah, because it does, as often as you can possibly be seen, your logo, your brand, who you are, and to be seen knowing, as she's talking about, as an expert in your field. I mean, so the more they see you, sometimes you don't want to bombard people to death, but if you can do it in easier ways, like the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and just stuff like that, because you don't want to kill them with email, but
Yeah.
still every now and then. But yeah, it does work, and those things, just those little marketing things that we've gotten on a steady schedule now of marketing of what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. And since we started that in January, our sales are going up. People may, if I put out a special about something, and tell them how they can use it as well. So it's not only do they call and maybe they do or don't want to order what I'm doing, but they go, oh yeah, and it ding ding dings in their head. So it just reminds them. It's like you guys, I mean, while I may not need you now, there almost was a time, you guys were first in our minds. So the fact that when we see Bridget's Mediation out there, when we need you, we're calling you. You know, because we see you all the time.
Right.
And that's what she's talking about, whether you know what you're talking about or not, we think you do.
So I bought that book after I was already having a bunch of therapists who I contracted with, who were working out my business, because I wanted to learn how can I get them booked more, how can I get them more business. So I bought that book and I started reading it, and I started formulating more what I call the paradox pitch, which is what I use when I give free consultations, and then we do this cheaper little consultation and tryout treatment, which I like the best because people already feel what the work can do. And the paradox pitch is where I tell people what they can do for themselves. And I tell them all the things that they can do without involving me, without hiring us. I tell them they can get cheap massages at massage schools. I tell them they can do these little things where you're sitting at Whole Foods or at Infusion Tea or like these chair massages. That if you just get like once a week, 10 minutes on your neck, it's gonna make you so much better. It is gonna make you so much better if you have neck pain. It really, if you have a good therapist, they can do a lot of work in 10 minutes. So I'm trying to just give easy options. I often follow up with an email where I just give them some stretches. I have a bunch of YouTube videos that I recorded with the kind of things that I recommend. And all these things help more with this inbound marketing. And I call it the paradox pitch because I often had the impression that the more I say, these are the different things that you can do, instead of saying you should book that many treatments with me, the more people say, no, but I want to work with you. So that's why I say it's a paradox, and of course you don't have to be too overboarding. I did that for a while, and people said, well, you're really trying to kick me out of here. I'm like, no. So, you know, I had to learn to fine-tune it, but I'm very comfortable with this kind of technique. But what I wanted to do by reading Michael Port's book was more to get the others booked more, and I kept just getting myself booked more. And so when I looked up the book, I found that there's another book called Beyond Booked Solid. And so I started reading the beginning of that, and it pretty much said, so now you're there. Now you are getting booked all the time. And I mean, I was working like 30 hours a week, and if you're doing physical body work, this is not a 30-hour week. This is like, you know, you have time in between appointments, people don't show, things get rescheduled, so it turns into like a 60-hour week, and then you haven't done any administration, and you haven't really followed up with your contractors and employees, and it was just insane. I mean, I felt like I was so drained. It was getting really hard, so I had to learn to manage my own schedule better. And that's where business growth comes in, where you're trying to figure out what are the things that I need other people for, and how do I find the right people, and how do I get my own workload a little lower. So when I found out that I need more business education, I found this book, which was pretty cool, which is also in a way similar to the E-Myth, because it just teaches the ground rules of running a business, building a business. And he has this whole thing, he has a whole big website with a lot of resources. He has like a list of 99 business books on there to pretty much build your own personal MBA program, which makes sense, especially nowadays where things keep changing so fast that we have to just get more information. Whenever I tried to get more education, and I would visit groups and I would talk to people, and they talk about all these visualizations and vision boards, and you just have to have your goals and you picture yourself already there. And I always found it a little hokey, and I always found, okay, all these people who believe in The Secret, I mean, they keep visualizing this $1 million check up there, and it never arrives in the mail. Yeah, surprise. So what I now heard, and I think it was you who told me about it, that there was actually research being done, finding out that the more you visualize yourself already there, the more you're activating the center in your brain that gives you this reward that says, yay, I mean, that's pretty much what cocaine does. Yay, you're already there, you made it, you're the greatest. I mean, how are you gonna get off the couch if you feel like you've already done so much? So that's what the research showed, is that people who visualize too much actually don't motivate themselves, but it's the opposite. They feel like they've already done the work so they can lean back. And they're very comfortable with their lofty goals. Because really, what we need to do is just do the work. I just read another thing, a blog post where they were talking about if you have a goal or you have a system, if you just have the system that gets you to the goal eventually, you're still getting somewhere because you're doing the right things over and over again. If you focus too much on the goal, but you don't have a system, you're not getting anywhere. And that's actually what I have been seeing in a lot of people who just don't get off the ground. But they envision these big things. When you have these lunches, they tell you all about their big business, and 3 years later you're sitting there at the lunch and they tell you the same thing, but they haven't gotten anywhere. So what you really need to do is build the right systems that eventually get you forward. Of course, you have to have an idea of where you want to go, because otherwise this kind of thing happens. In the beginning, when you're growing a business and you start hiring people, you have this whole idea of you will work less hours and you will have less stress and you will make more profit. But in the very beginning, it's hard. You hire an employee and your workload goes up, and your stress levels go up, and you still don't really see any more profit. You kind of see things going either at the same level, or maybe they're going up a little bit, but it's going to cost you a lot in energy, and you end up sleeping less because you have to train somebody else. The most important thing about hiring people is that you have to have a system in place first. You have to know what you're doing. You can't hire somebody when you're totally overloaded, because then you bring that other person in and they don't understand what you're doing. You don't have time to tell them. You kind of expect them to miraculously sort out all your files and know what to do, but they want direction from you and you don't have time to give them direction. So how's this gonna work? It's just creating more and more stress. And it just goes on like that. You hire independent contractors and you want them to bring in their own clients, and it takes forever for them to get started with that. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is it's always gonna take a little longer, and you need to have resources before you grow. You need to have extra time, you need to have extra money, because it's not gonna happen by itself. You move into a bigger space, things just flatten out, you know. You might have more space, but you need more clients to fill it. And it's just one thing after another. You pay more rent and so on. I was at a point a year ago where all this growth that looks so nice when you read my bio, and that looks so amazing when I talk to neighbors in College Park, and they're saying, whoa, you keep just growing and you keep adding another room, and now we see you have so many therapists, this is amazing. And it was last year at some point where I really started thinking, like, I'm just throwing good money after that. This is going nowhere. This is not working. It's just costing me more and more and more. And I started questioning whether the whole business model was working at all. Because all this growth had just cost me more and more. And I felt like I'm bleeding out here. I inherited some money. That was the only thing that made it possible. But that pot was dry. And I felt like, you know, if I don't pay myself enough now, this is not working. What am I going to do? Am I going to go back to Germany and start scratching on my parents' door? I mean, what am I going to do? So what I did was sit down with somebody who could give me some advice, and then I started restructuring a few things, and it was actually surprisingly easy, just by taking on a stronger leadership role, and by talking to the therapists and getting them to just agree to hours that fit the whole business concept better. We were able to completely turn things around, and we raised the prices. We did really well in going towards raising rates so that none of our clients felt mad about it. The people who are on our membership, we just gave them the old price for an extra 6 months, so they even feel rewarded. And now we're looking like this is really working, and this is letting us both live, and it looks like it's going really great. And now it looks like it really is the business that it looks like on paper from the outside. But last year it was tough. It was really, really tough. So the idea of growing and hiring people, it is right that a lot of people are afraid of it and that they feel like, I'd rather do it myself because I know what I'm doing. But the problem with that is that you're always in the same spot and you're just treading water and you're kind of tied to this thing that at some point you really love doing. What I really love doing now is teaching. I'm going to start to do lectures in a lot of different places about the specific kind of massage therapy that I do. And I love having that. I love teaching others what they can do to ease the pain in the world, and I feel like I can help so many more people. But when I started out, I loved doing the body work. So these things change, but what I see in other people who just work by themselves is they get stuck in the treatment room because they have to pay the bills. And only when you grow your business, you get to the place where you can get a little further away from it.
Hey Lou,
Yes?
what you were saying there, just if I can say, just really, really hit home for us, especially this year and last year, is that, okay, we know we're getting more business, but we need to be able to grow. How are we gonna hire somebody? And there was two things. One, processes. So there's a thing called Visio, will help you process map. But we had to hire a company we met through NGLCC, and they're a business org. We'd actually hired Dr. Dave, and he got me working on time management and stuff a lot better.
Good.
And then we had another company out of DC and Dallas that we worked with on the phone and the computer, and they had us learn how to process map so that from the time I meet somebody till the time it is delivered and the thank you note or whatever is sent to somebody, that we have an actual process, not only in the marketing, the sales side, but we have research tools. And so okay, Dawn and I know how to do it.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for 7 years, but, all right. Wow, this is really complicated because there's a lot that goes into these orders and details and art and all kinds of stuff. So when we put that on paper, it was like, holy crap, now we have a training manual.
Right. We started doing
And
that
it didn't
too.
take that long to sit down and do it when you write out step by step everything you've got to do. And that, and bringing in the business work person and has really, really set us off to just a phenomenally different way that we're looking at things and able to bring on our first employees.
And having a manual helps you to analyze your own
Oh, I've got it
process.
stuck right in front of me because I find myself, because I know how to cheat and go around the stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
I find myself starting, nope, I've got to do this consistently the same way,
Yeah.
you know, unless something,
This would be a good
Out of
measuring
whack.
tool for your employees' performance as well.
thank you. That's good.
No, and we started doing that at our office as well. And you just need to get started, you know, like we realize that. And then when there's a bottleneck, it's kind of like, wow, obviously we need to like really revisit this little area where we're stuck. But it's kind of like you're saying, because it allows you to fine tune your business. What, as a planner, what we like to kind of see with a lot of small businesses is that a lot of small businesses tend to, kind of like you said, you're doing what you love. But the other piece of it is that then so much energy and resources goes into this doing what you love.
Give me money?
Yeah, everything
Time and
goes
money.
here. And
Time
so,
and money.
you know, when I pull back and I look at the situation, you know, then it's kind of like, wow, one of the things we keep saying is don't put your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
And all the eggs are going into this one asset class. And so once we're not diversifying, right? And then just outside of that is probably our home, right? For a lot of small business people. So then it's those two pieces. And so it's always so what we've noticed is that a lot of us tend to figure out how to give ourselves a job.
Yes.
Because we're not building anything that has a value that then somebody could just say, dang, I really like what you got over there. I want to buy you out. And so then you can somehow at some point take what you've built and convert it into something that provides you an ability to shift gears in your life at one point.
That's what he's saying in the E-Myth. He's saying that you should set up every business as if it is the model for a franchise. You should set it up so that somebody else can take it and work on it. And that really was one of the big aha moments for me, because really what I did in the beginning was just build my dream job and everybody else's dream job too. In regards to hiring people, that's a whole big topic that I think we're going to be talking later in the series about some more. What I like to do is just ask around first. I mean, usually what we do first is we just put it out on Facebook. So we're looking for somebody. Because people who you ask, people who are your network, it's kind of their reputation on the line too. So that has often helped a lot. What I already said is, you have to be prepared. You have to have time to train somebody, and it makes sense to have your processes in order. And then what I learned over time is that really the very first, usually I do things by email, not by phone call, so the first email already tells me a lot. How long does it take them to answer? We get these Facebook things, we put something out and people say, yeah, me. Say, okay, send me a resume. Should be easy, right? I get maybe one resume and 10 just, they wanted the job, obviously, or at least they said so, but they don't ever get around to sending the resume. So these kind of things, I started really building steps where then I send an email back and I write it deliberately convoluted. I just ramble on and I say, okay, these are the things I'm thinking of, la la la, la la la, and I see how they handle that. Do they see my questions in there? Do they answer them? So those things teach me a lot, especially if I'm looking for administrators. I want to know if they can spell. I want to know if they understand me, even if I'm in a rush, because that's going to happen. So there's a lot of tests that can be built into the very beginning of the hiring process before you even sit down for an interview.
That's wild.
This was one of the things that I found really good to remember, is that, you look at somebody's attitude a lot more than whether they can already do the job, because then you're training them for the right skills. If they think they know all about what you're doing, it might be even worse than if you have somebody who says, I don't know, but I want to learn. And if what you're getting through the beginning steps and what you see, what you hear from references, if that is the person who learns fast, who wants to learn, you're in a much better position. And I see nods all around, it makes sense. This whole question is going to be good for the accountants and for Gail Owens, who's going to teach us a lot more about business law. The most important thing is really to figure out, are you going to require somebody to be there at certain hours? If you are, they're already an employee. If you tell them you have to be there at this time, they're clearly not an independent contractor. Then it's also processes. If you tell them exactly how to do the job, they're an employee. If you hire them for something that they know how to do, like my massage therapists, I mean, they do their own business. They're more like partners. They pay me to do all the administration and marketing. I pay them to do the work on the clients. But the session is fully in their hands. I don't say you do first the arms and then this and that. They just do it however they feel like it's the best for the client. And then of course it's also, you can hire an independent contractor for just this one project, unless you're saying you have to be there at 9 a.m. to do this project. This is one of the things that is very difficult, and it was interesting when we had more administrative staff, especially for Deborah. It was so hard for her to let go of all these minutiae, where I kept saying, why are you doing this?
I'm the one who knows how to do it.
And just let somebody else do it. I find the easiest way to do it is to just think about the things you don't like. And I started to sit down with different staff members and just ask them, okay, which part of your job would you like to get rid of? And they look at me like it's some kind of a tricky test question. I'm like, no, seriously, what do you not want to do? Because I find somebody else who does it. I find some way, and then everybody's happier. And what is really dry and annoying for the one person, and they're like, oh yeah, this thing. Somebody else is like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that, that's easy. What I read, it was a blog post about social media, where they're like, how do you find time for doing social media? Hire somebody to clean, hire somebody to do your yard work. unless you love gardening, and then of course you should do it yourself because then it's good for your recreation. But all these minutiae, all these things that really somebody else could do outside your business, think about that a little bit because you can really create a lot more time. Because your time usually is valuable a lot, and if you can create more business, if you can go out and network, you're getting a lot higher value than from cleaning your house. I don't like cleaning. If you love cleaning, well then, it's good for your recreation. In order to train people, I find it the best thing to not only have a manual, but also to just do it one step at a time. Just give them one thing to do, and then see how they're doing it, and then teach them on the next thing. The biggest mistake that we did in the beginning was pretty much just, here's the manual, do it. And even if we felt like we showed them a million times, it still doesn't really work. What we had to do over time was also to start with checklists. I read a study where they found in the hospitals that so many people were getting infections after getting injections. And so they said, let's just try this out, to just give the doctor a checklist before they give the injection, like, okay, this is how you wash your hands, this is how you disinfect the skin. The doctors were like, what are you talking about? I know how to give an injection, I've been doing this. I know exactly what I'm doing, and if there's ever infections, it's not my fault, it's somebody else. They forced them to do the checklist, and 50% of the infections were gone. It was a big difference immediately, and when I sat down my admin staff and I said, I want a checklist for the morning to open and for the evening to close and all the different things that you have to be doing. Fortunately, they didn't react like the doctors. They were like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Now everybody has a checklist, and it reduced all these mistakes that our clients never noticed it. But we had to clean up after it. We had to figure out how to do it. We had, if a voicemail gets lost, to me that's the worst. That's when I'm really raising a storm and I sit people down on how could this have happened, because to me that's the worst thing. But everybody has their little pet peeves, and there's always measures that you can put into place in order to avoid that these little mistakes happen where then people look at you like, well, this is just a little thing. But in my opinion, it's always the little things that make the big difference in the long run. Social media I put on there because in a lot of cases, that's not a good thing to delegate. You kind of need to stay close to what you're saying out there. If you delegate it to somebody who has been working with you for a long time, so they know your business, they incorporate, they are the business identity already in person. Cynthia, you wanted to say something?
I was gonna say something about the checklist. I'm
Yeah.
like Susie checklist queen.
Ah.
Checklists everywhere. And I think that checklists are important for two reasons. A, because I think as a small business owner, we get yanked in so many different directions.
Yes.
And so if I'm working on something and a client comes in or an employee comes in or a phone rings or something, I can stop and I know exactly where I need to pick back up.
Yes.
And I think that saves me a lot of times. But on a liability point, we have checklists in our service department. So when we sell a boat, if we have a checklist to make sure that you've checked the drain pipes, you've checked, the batteries, you've checked the keys, you've checked all of these things for liability to make sure that, your customers are good to go and nobody's gonna come back, whether it's you're selling a boat or whether it's a service department, or things like that. I think liability is a big thing for a checklist too. And
Yes.
it helps cover you
That
to
is
make
very
sure that
good.
everything's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, that's very important. This is another cool book. And the author was really smart in how she marketed her own book in the very beginning. Because the first thing that she did is find a group of loyal followers, people who were always reading her blog, and ask them to be like her personal book promotion team. So those people got a free copy of the book before it was released, and then when it was released, they put reviews on Amazon, and they told all their friends to buy it. The book is still going well, and it's really great. I got it for free, and then I bought it, and then I gave it to other people, and they really liked it. It's not only about loyalty to other people, it's this whole idea of building a loyal community. Because what you do once you build a group of people that are helping each other is you get the self-feeding process with you at the center. So that is something that really helps small businesses be part of a bigger community, but also create its own little community. And that was also full of a lot of aha moments. One thing I think everybody should learn just in their life, similar to the negotiations thing, this one skill, it makes everything better and makes your reputation better and reduces your stress level. Makes you more productive and gets you more clients, and it's really just the ability to say no. And the better you get at that, the more easy it is. I have one employee and she's really good at boundaries and very clear about. She tells people they have to pay a cancellation fee and nobody gets ever mad at her. With others, they're like, well, it's really because, and we have to pay the therapist something for their time and this and that and the other, and then this person feels like they have to argue back. If you're clear and you really stand by your message, it's relatively easy to say no, and I think it is the most important thing, especially if you're running your own business, because there's so many things that come up that you eventually end up spending all your time just taking care of a lot of little jobs. If you had said no to a lot of them in the beginning, you would have time for the big job. So that was something for me to just start understanding. It's like I shouldn't put my schedule so full with things. I should be able to say, no, I can do this in 2 weeks instead of trying to do it tomorrow. Because I also need time to recover a little bit. And I need time for all these things that suddenly come up. And so since I've been better about just saying no to a lot of little things that come up and just stick to my schedule, the easier it gets. If you are somebody who cares so deeply about people that you want to say yes to everything, it might also be a good thought that if you do say no to a bunch of things, you can say yes to the right thing, because you're not already bogged down by all these little commitments.
Yeah, I just, because, I mean, I always want to help people. Sure, yes, absolutely, yes, and except this, yes, no, wait, yes, no, both hands are full, you know, and so that's always been, that's been another kind of thing that I've had to learn. But saying no is, it's like the lady who teaches yoga that we go to and that teaches private lessons through Balance talks about how you can't, keep saying yes and then you're empty and there's nothing there. You have to, you have to be full yourself, and then you give of the overflow. And so if you're always saying yes all the time, there's nothing left of yourself. So you have to, fill yourself up. And if that means that, no, I need this time for myself, you fill yourself up, and then you have more of the overflow. And the overflow is so nice for people.
You know what I found one of the hardest things with saying no is that you have to give an excuse. And for me, it was just no.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it to you.
Yeah.
And this was when my children were entering into adulthood.
Yeah.
I learned, Kim pointed out to me several times, you don't have to explain it to them. You're the damn mom.
That's what Deb said to me, because she learned it in customer care, is that you,
That title has.
But that was just for me very like, I don't have to explain myself, what?
and that's why I say it improves even your reputation. Because if you're always explaining, you look like you're apologizing for yourself. It doesn't work. You want to explain because you feel bad, but people understand that you have to have.
All you're doing is giving them more
other things.
fuel to continue to argue with you.
Which is a problem, even if they don't want to argue. Whatever you're saying just gets them into thinking like, well, but here you could do this and that.
You were saying about the customer care, about
Yeah.
not giving too much information and just,
Yeah. Say no, I can't do it.
yeah, and with customer care, usually it's no, I'm sorry, I can't do it, but, with a smile, but yeah, and that's the end of that.
Firing a client's kind of fun sometimes, especially
yeah,
when
say
they're
no
a
to-
jerk.
You don't, if you
Well, I had to
fire
do that
a client-
once, actually fire one, but he was such a jerk.
Yeah.
And I had gone around in circles trying to make this guy happy, and I realized
Yeah.
nobody will make this guy happy. I'm not going through this stress or aggravation. And I politely, after I said something, he didn't find it humorous, I guess, and I said, you know what? I think you'll be better off with somebody else.
Yeah.
I appreciate the time and have a nice day.
And you don't, and
Boy,
you
what a
didn't lose the
relief.
client,
Yeah.
you didn't lose the
Yeah.
client, you got rid of a problem.
Absolutely.
Having all of the
Absolutely.
duds.
Absolutely.
Now, if we say no to a bunch of people and we keep all these gaps in our schedule so that we have time for this big opportunity that comes, and it does come up. I mean, that's what happened to me, is that as soon as I left open spaces, opportunities start showing up. But there really is this thing out there. There is a glorification of, oh, I'm so busy, I always have things going on. Which, I mean, for me, it almost made me feel a little guilty if I don't have the afternoon book up. So when I saw that, I just keep that in my head. It helps me a lot. Like, this is, busy is glorified to no end, and there's no good reason for it, because all that a lot of people are doing is running in circles and just doing the same thing over and over again, and they're not getting forward either with just being busy, busy, busy. We talked a lot about time management already. One of the things my sister learned when she was sent by her boss to a time management seminar for, I think it was like about 30 years after when she should have learned it. But what she learned was you should only schedule 60% of your time, of like your work time, only schedule 60%. If you own a business, schedule only 50 because of SWA. Shit will always happen. It will, totally, especially if you own your own business. Eat, sleep, think, exercise. Dr. Dave was brought up. I really like his work. I went to him a few times when I was going crazy. He says there's these 4 big things. Eat, sleep, think, exercise correctly. Eat the right things that are good for you. Make sure you get good sleep on a regular schedule and all these things. Think the right thoughts. Be aware of what goes on in your head. And you need time for that. That's why I put it here. Same thing for money. Keep SWA in mind. Eat, sleep, think, exercise. Investments, if you have this extra chunk of money, I think it's most important to have your business stable instead of buying a house, buying a new car, especially the new car thing. And people sit on those car payments. Material goods, like a new car that makes you happy for like 2 weeks. If you invest something into a nice little vacation, you have a lot longer of it, even if it's counterintuitive. This one is very fluffy, and it sounds a little hokey, and I am mildly embarrassed for bringing it up. But that's another little ebook that I read recently, and it was mentioned in a blog post. And then I got this Crabtree Healthy Living newsletter, and it had this wonderful quote in there, love yourself first, and everything else falls into line. Like I said initially, of course, it's not all that easy, and it's not about loving yourself and you're magically going to have a great business. But if you don't take care of yourself first, if you don't treat yourself with loving kindness, nothing works. And a lot of the things that we already said are parts of it. The little book that is on there, that was actually pretty good. That if you like to read, it's a good thing. Love yourself like your life depends on it. I mean, this guy, he was literally shortly before dying, and the only way he got out of his own mess was, the only way he stayed alive was to really put I love myself as the center of every day that he had. And he did a good job of explaining it, that's why I brought it up in here. So follow the flow chart. When in doubt, whenever in doubt. That is pretty much how I've been running my life, and that is pretty much what I think has made me successful with all the mistakes that I mentioned. This is what I always do. When I'm not happy, I change something. I might change things too fast. Other people might change things too slow. But I make sure I do change something, and then I reevaluate and see what happens. Just to have a few takeaways. Getting help, I think, is the most important thing. From the right people is important too. The right people are the ones who sometimes tell us what we don't want to hear. The right people is a guy I talked to last year. I think that was a trigger for me to really start changing things. Because I said, well, yeah, eventually this will happen. And he said, eventually. You say eventually all the time when it's about setting your therapists down and telling them what to do. You need to do this now. You really need to do this now. And that was what got stuck in my head, like, okay, I need to do this. You need mentors, coaches, friends who really tell you the things that go against your confirmation bias. And that's always hard. It's still hard for me to listen to constructive criticism, but at the same time, I know this is the only way I can really learn something. when you say yes, commit fully. Saying no makes you more committed to the things you say yes to. And this is one of the little things that I see all the time, and I'm sure you're seeing too when you talk to other business owners. I mean, even just a coffee appointment gets forgotten, or it gets, you know, you're sitting there, somebody doesn't show up, or they show up 10 minutes late with stupid excuses. If you say no to a lot of things, you can really commit to the ones you say yes to. More ideas, something you find important, something you want to point out for the rest of us.
I did hear a really good thing on the no thing. No is a complete sentence.
That's great, I love that.
Okay, and then the other thing is, if you're caught off guard, because I used to be a lot of time, let me see, let me get back to you about that.
Nice.
And I had to put it on my phone, and,
Yes.
you know, and take a break in big letters to start to learn to do that. And my girlfriend's mother told me about that. Never
Nice.
commit immediately like that, because, you know, you don't have your calendar, you know, somebody's asking you, they're blah, pick up at the airport or whatever, and of course, we're all women who are like, sure. Let me check back with you. And then, you know, you got time to think, you got time to look at your calendar, you call them back, you can think about it.
Right. Yeah, leaving open space is my schedule, was for me the important thing. Like, I have to leave it open, because shit will always happen. It will. It really will. And just today, I had all this open space where I thought I can go over the presentation. Well, then I get a call from a friend who has a panic attack in the parking lot of my business. I'm like, oh, I hope he's not gonna walk in and be all weird. So, you know, I had to run over there and talk him down. Weird things, the weirdest thing ever. I mean, you know, stuff like that comes up. Staying in touch, networking. If you're not connected with me yet, if you are on Facebook, if you're on any of the other social media channels, I'd be even more excited. Recommendations on LinkedIn are a great thing. If there's something that you want to be recommended for on LinkedIn and you tell me more about what you're doing, I'm always happy to write one. Otherwise, I'm easiest available by email, and I'm always happy to hear from people. And just sit down and meet for lunch, because we all have to eat, right?